So welcome to the last lecture of this year, Shanghai. Today we will have a very interesting session because we will have first my usual short introduction. Then we will have a presentation of a Chinese room experiment from China. And then we will have a guest lecture by Rod Pfeiffer. So I will continue until 10:05. Then we will have a student presentation from Xi'an. And at 10:15 Central European Time, we will have Rod Pfeiffer presentation. Now, I already, to save time, since it is a long video, I already started to show you this nice, the opening of an American movie which won the Oscar a few years ago, and it starts with a bomb disposal. Performed by using a robot. I think it's extremely interesting because a while ago you should have noticed the interface, and now we are looking at the typical teleoperation activity. You see, you have this rigid grip, removing the envelope. Because they suppose that there is a bomb on this carriage. By the way, it's also a reminder that we live in interesting times and robots are already used and sometimes also for not very nice purposes. You see, you have a typical remote interface. And this is a typical robot. I think it is an iRobot robot from bomb disposal. And you see, this is a typical arm. It is on a mobile robot. It's kind of a long video, so maybe I will skip some part. You see, so you have this interface, and you have to put so use the hand of the robot as if it was your hand. And now they are trying to operate because supposedly that they have a bomb they need to do. Now they try again because the previous attempt failed. I have mixed feelings, but this is a typical real world environment. You see, no? And now typically an unexpected event has stopped the robot. You see how it ends, right? So the robot is unable to perform the task, and a human intervention is needed. Okay, I don't show you the end, but you can easily imagine it. Because finally, in the movie, the human attempt to remove the bomb from the carriage phase and the soldier that you have seen die. So this is interesting because actually is a movie interpretation of the famous thought experiment proposed by Dennett, an American philosopher of mind. Yeah. Sorry about that. We noticed that we had some background noise. So this bomb disposal, no? Because you may think that you have seen, having followed the previous lectures, some issues from our standpoint on the robot design, but it's, by the way, it's a state-of-the-art robot design for that purpose. But the gripper is rigid, so it's serious problems to manipulate, for instance, limp, soft stuff, the tissue which was covering the bomb, that the tracks are not very good for an uneven terrain, and that the environment is very messy because it is a real world environment. Of course, the problem is kind of fixed because you have a carriage with a bomb and you have the robot that is, by the way, teleoperated, not autonomous, in charge of removing the bomb. And this is a kind of problem. You may see them as technical issues, right? So it's rigid. Maybe if the end was soft, it would have been easier. Maybe the transmission of the image and the transmission of the forces is not optimal. It might be bad. But there are also other kind of issues, and those issues are related to the famous and many times reminded problem of the frame of reference. In fact, working on a poor abstract thought model of this same situation, well, of a very similar situation, Dennett proposes this example. So let's think that we have a robot which lives on a battery, and the recharge battery is in a room on a small wagon, together, by the way, with a bomb, and he has to recover the battery without let the bomb explode. So how typically in good, the so-called good old-fashioned AI paradigm of view would approach this problem? You would write, this is a fictitious, perfectly invented language, but you may see the analogies with many other languages that are used for, or have been used for these purposes. So you will have a kind of small program where the robot will have to understand where the battery is, then remove it, and later we'll have to install it as a charge, to substitute his current battery. So the very first program that you might write for that purpose is something like, go inside the room, check where is the battery. So this is what is the line on battery wagon. So you see that the battery is on the wagon. So you have to take out the battery because you want to use it, and you want to take out you take out it from the warehouse. So pull out wagon, room. But since this is the first implementation of a robot, of our fictitious robot, it doesn't consider that there is the bomb. And this is what happens. So, of course, it pulls out the wagon and then the bomb explodes. I would say like in the movie for different reasons. Then we may, so you may think, no, the mistake is that I should consider all the consequences of my action, me, the artificial reasoning system of the robot. So this is again, so it's really, so a real program would be a bit longer with more details, but this gives the idea, right? So it will be like before. So you go inside the room, you check where is the battery. The battery is on the wagon. And then you start to see what happens if you take out the wagon where the battery lies on out of the room. So the color of the walls is not changing. The speed wheels revolution not changing. So you have to do a very long list of consequences. What happens is that while the system is reasoning of all the potentially infinite consequences of its acts, the bomb explodes again. So where is the problem? So you may notice another joke, movie-related joke, because in the Star Wars you have R2-D2, and this is R2-D1, right? And we stop at R2-D1 because for R2-D2 we need something more sophisticated than this kind of approaches, a purely symbolic approach. So again, so the problem is that I don't only have to decide which are the consequences of all the possible sequence of acts that the robot could do to solve its problem, putting the battery out of a wagon. So I will have to decide that some facts are relevant and some facts, some consequences of the acts are not relevant. So again, I have to calculate all the consequences of the acts. All the consequences of the acts, and then also classify them as relevant, less relevant, more relevant. What happens in this case, in this Freud experiment, always the same. No? So, by the way, I put here, if you see here I put on the slides, and you will have the slides, the reference to the original article where this experiment was discussed. But what Dennett tried to point out, and I think it's really, I think most of us agree on that, is that what is obvious to us, because we have a lot of tacit assumptions, a lot of reasoning, if you want to talk, call it reasoning, about the reality that we are not even conscious of. It's difficult, if possible at all, I would bet it's not possible at all, to be implemented with a symbolic model or representation of a world. Because the number of potential side effects, and most of the side effects what we do are relevant. For instance, there is a flow of neutrons in this room that we are not aware of. And we are probably changing a bit the distribution of the Wi-Fi radio wave by moving in this place or moving these objects. I mean, most of the things that occur around us are relevant. But if you are in this idea of having, I'm afraid we have an alarm, but I think it is an exercise. So if I don't force me to go out, or will they stay here?
No, we stay here.
No, sorry. Let's. Wait a couple of minutes. Sorry, because we are having an exercise because they perform that vote at random. So we are just quickly checking if it is an exercise, not a real emergency, but I think it should be. No, well, sorry, because it's an exercise that for some time we do, and of course but because otherwise we have to stop for half an hour, so I think it's not.
We can hear that. We can hear that from here.
You can't? Yeah, okay, sorry. So, okay, let's continue. So, we should never joke about bombs, because, and so this is the point. So the number of side effects that are mostly not relevant, most of them, are actually, if you have a full reasoning approach, you have to test everything, and it ends up in a very, very difficult problem. That's why I don't say that with a symbolic approach it won't be. So it's a test. Sorry for. It is not so it's very feasible, but the length of the programs that you need to use with that approach could be really very, very long and not practically feasible if it would be feasible in principle. So this kind of problem also affects, this is a post by Rodney Brooks blog that I really recommend everybody to check from time to time, because Brooks has usually very nice insights. This was, and he also likes to go against the commonly received opinions. And this was a nice post in June this year about the self-driving car, because he was actually claiming that we are not as close as we think to having a self-driving car. And in this blog, which would require probably a full lecture to be discussed in detail, he gives a list of examples that I think are basically real-world application of the reasoning that Dennett did in abstract, and that we have been at the beginning of this movie that was actually about the Iraqi war, but it starts with a robot, my favorite part of the and the examples are quite, if you think about it, are quite reasonable. For example, what a robot, a self-driving robot will do if it is in a one-way road and the one-way road is blocked. Because what a human would do would be that you would slowly, even if it is not permitted by the rules, you would slowly retract and go back and slide, creep in another road. The robot will stay there forever. Of course, there is an obvious solution to that. That the driver can take back control, or you have a remote, because since one of the applications of autonomous driving is for elders or impaired people, from a remote place, they take control of the car and they decide what to do. But the problem is that this is not a fully autonomous car. And we have seen at the beginning what happens with teleoperation. Most times it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So in the real world, maybe in that case, someone from the central would have to go to save your self-driving robot car and solve the issue. Maps are most of the time well updated, but they are not always well updated. And many details are not on the map. Another point is what you do with police. So if police stops the car, for example, because the car was infringing the rules going in the wrong direction in a one-way road, the car will have to interact with the police. Okay, you may have a robot police, but again, so we may create a list of this kind of anomalous situation for the police robot. Then you have a particular situation. For instance, your car has an engine problem and has to be towed. How the car manage the tow? And I think that if you spend some time on that, you will find tens of different tricky situations. What I wanted to say is that all of them are actually variation on the topic of the Dennett experiment. So, because basically the real world is surprising, right? So sometimes surprises are good, like when Columbus, on the basis of completely wrong calculations of the diameter of Earth, didn't reach India, but was actually lucky and discovered America. Otherwise, if America didn't exist, they would have died by starvation on the basis of the calculation that were wrong. Some other times you have bad surprise, like the global market crash of 2008. That was, to most people, not every people, but to most people, unexpected. And someone say that it was really based on this idea that what you know still follow a statistical distribution that you know. So they call it the Gaussian fallacy. So thinking that the uncertain events follow the Gaussian curve. It's not a joke, because all the pricing and insurance models on derivatives, insurance on natural or other kind of unexpected situation are based on linear Gaussian models. So and someone claims that the crash of 2008 was actually due to that, so that they didn't expect the so-called black swans. So sometimes you have events like discovery of America, or the burst of the real estate bubble in the United States, which change completely your assumptions and have unexpected consequences. So I will, this is a long list of things that I want to, because today I'd like to, in this actually a few minutes, I still have, but I mean, the key lesson, I think, is the lesson about GUFA today. What I really wanted to underline was yet another time the frame of reference problem, which is affecting most still most robotics and AI implementation, and it is a serious issue. So I will do now a very short, very short summary of what we have said so far. So we have said basically that this approach implemented by the American Iraqi robot in the first movie, and by Dennett's robots and by self-driving robots, about they already have a probabilistic module which makes things a bit more realistic and make the system more robust. The principles of having a state machine, that essentially deterministic state machine, moving a mechanical actuator, has been there for a lot of time. It was there in the Renaissance. It was there even thousands of years ago in old Greece and ancient Greece and ancient China. And of course, having a much more sophisticated state machine as it is possible with modern microprocessor, it is also in very modern Androids. So the idea that actually shared, I would say, not just by me, also by our institute, but many other people, is that we have a kind of waves in robotics development. The first wave was, which was and is extremely successful, is more or less exploited excess of knowledge, mechanical engineering, computer science, meaning algorithms like Dennett, and good old-fashioned control engineering. Most industrial robots, believe me, have simple linear control. And that's why they need to be extremely able. What's happening now is that we have a second wave where, thanks to the Internet of Things, which is the possibility of connecting with a protocol like the Internet protocol, many things in a very cheap way. Machine learning, which is a powerful tool because it allows to have realistic behaviors about it doesn't fix everything, and some artificial intelligence. This is leading to an explosion of application robots. This is just one of the analysis suggesting how the adoption, the robot market would grow in the next coming years. And most of them are more or less there. And my personal feeling is that they could even be very conservative. This happens all the time. It happens with solar panels. I mean, typically, we tend to, the studies and reports on this kind of technological trends tend to be conservative, rightly conservative, and but as a consequence, they many times underestimate what is going to happen. So this is 65, someone says 67, no, this is 67, someone says 65, someone says 70 billions in 2025. But what's happening is that we have an explosion, so we are following a kind of exponential. An obvious consequence of this kind of second wave technology is the so-called Industry 4.0 from the German. Actually, it was initially introduced in Germany as Industry 4.0, but it's now commonly. So the idea is that by applying analyzing data, distributing the supply chain, the logistic chain of the internet, and applying kind of internet inside the factory, and using in the factory those kind of vision and perception systems that in the wild don't work, but in a structural part can work. We have a potential to have a new industrial revolution. Now, and we can do all this nice stuff. Where the nice thing is that actually before robots, in typical application of robots, you see robots behind fences. Now we have possibility, thanks to sensor, to some scene analysis capability, but also thanks to machine learning have improved a lot, put humans, like in this example, together. And this is also this kind of industry 4.0 effects and approaches have also the potential to have a wider impact than in manufacturing. So the one on manufacturing is actually very, so it's a transformative, so we can really change the way we produce things, but maybe we can also change them more radically, because as you know, we have different calculations, but if, as it seems we are heading to, all the population of the planet aims to enjoy a level of consumerism compared not to the American one, but to the slightly more modest European one, we would need the resources if technology is constant of several planets. So we are heading towards a very serious situation. But luckily, what before was difficult because it was very difficult to dismantle and to recover all the pieces of an old car when they called a car. And so about we have been talking about sustainable manufacturing and economy for decades. So far it was quite difficult to implement in an economical way because building was super automated by robots and very quick. Because when you build, you know the environment, you know the robots, you know the design. Then disassembling an old car is another story because all old cars are different because they have been changed by usage in ways that you don't know. So you need a kind of robot which is much more intelligent and absolutely not blind as the ordinary welding robot or assembly robot to perform a task. I would say that with Industry 4.0 technologies, we have a potential to do this, so which really will fix a lot of. Now I try really to accelerate, but another nice factor is on constructions. For a lot of times, of decades, people like Rogers or other famous architects with a social concept, no? With social, with the aim of improving the lives of most of the people, I propose that low-cost, high-quality constructions, no, for welding, for human welding. And in the past, it was nice, it was generous, but the problem is that prefabrication only allowed to have very, very similar houses. So the result is that in most of the planet, including Italy, we have enormous suburbs which are a shame from a statistical or urbanistic standpoint. What we can now do is to have a high quality mass production of houses, and in many areas of the planet this is in many areas of the planet, this is a very actual problem. But also where, like, for example, in Italy and most Europe, during the massive urbanization, a lot of bad housing is being built, we have an opportunity to refurbish. So it seems that we are living in the middle of a great success, but what we have already seen is that if you want to consider the DARPA challenge, humanoid robotics as a practical state of the art of robotics, what we have seen is this, right? So, and what is really interesting is that on an average, because this Oli Yanko, a professor of the University of Maryland, did a kind of background study on the sociology of people working on the robots. So among other data, they collected how many people were working to teleoperate the robots during the challenge, and the average is slightly above 10, and the results are not always this one, but not as good as expected. That's why we look for a more deeply bio-inspired approach like that. No? We expect a third wave of this of robotics based on, call it bionics, call it deep bio-inspiration, on the massive exploitation of self-organization, morphological computation, and the likes that we have taught. Because increasingly, increasingly robotics is seen as science, with some problems on the methodology. I finish here. This is someone knows that I could talk for ages on this topic, because from a philosophical standpoint, but you know that engineers many times dismiss philosophy, and someone says, because usually engineers say, I don't care about the philosophy, but some philosophers say, because engineers follow 19th century positivism, and they don't even know. But apart from that, if I say that a certain approach, good old-fashioned AI approach, is not as good as an approach based on self-organization, deep bio-inspiration, morphological computation, and the likes, I need to prove it. So this means, and today, many times, this kind of check on the experiments is quite difficult to say. So, and on this, I just go to the end. You see that also on this, I don't know if you can, at the moment, you see my slides. Ah, no, no, okay. Oh, sorry, I had some, you see that still have, from time to time, we have technical issue. So I go fastly on this part. I just want to say that we have really nice issues in front of us. For instance, to see to what extent we can implement a bio-like robotics. We have this typical paradigm fight in between recognition and computation paradigm and recognition emerge as something emerging from sensory motor and interaction flow. And we also have problems with soft robotics because someone means that soft is putting some spring and damping in a rigid body. Someone else, like my colleague Cecilia Lasky and Barbara Mazzalas, think that actually we should have a fully deformable body, but with all the problems of modeling that we have discussed before. Now, I just go to really to the end. So we have many effects on society. I'm sorry if I really go fast, but so people fear the impact of employment. This is a study from 2014. What I would say is that given the level of quantitative benchmarking of the state of the art, so these guesses are interesting, and you have to guess even if you don't have a model, but they are based on a number of assumptions that we cannot check at the moment. So it's probably that it's like with the climate change. I'm pretty sure that in 100 years, if we don't collapse as a social system, almost everything will be possibly automated. If you ask me what will be automated in 10 years, I don't. Basically, my answer is insufficient bit. And what I only want to say is that given the demographic trends, I'm not so worried by unemployment. I'm afraid that we will have the opposite problem of not having enough person power to run our society. And now, just so on the cons, I will continue after Rolf's presentation. Anyway, you have the presentation on the website. So my suggestion, my recommendation as a final carry-on message is let's try to serve the third wave, the one based on the new robotic paradigm that we are pushing. Because I'm pretty sure that robotics has the potential to lead us to a new global renaissance. Thank you. Now we do a small change and we let Rolf start, and then Jan will continue after Rolf. And for those of you who have time, I will also give some indication of the cons. But now I think it's the time is Rolf's time with the slide. Rolf, as you know, is Rolf Sensei. It's not a joke. It's a real leader in AI, and I would say that many of the ideas, for sure in this teaching, but many of the more advanced idea of on what the next generation embodying AI, so not even AI or robotics, but the two together, will be, I think, we rely a lot on Ralph's contribution. So thank you, Ralph, for for coming, and we are eager to listen to your talk. It's not silent.
Can you hear me?
The floor is yours.
Yeah, but can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
And how can I?
Yeah, of course.
How can I share my?
Yes, yes, please.
But how can I do that? I don't.
Oh, you don't remember? So you have to go in the first.
I don't know.
Before you were able to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always, what I'm not sure what I need to do.
Yeah, because you have a number of pop-down menus, and you start from the left. So if you are in the window Cisco WebEx Meeting Center, you should first click.
Okay, meetings. Okay, and then
one.
meeting center, and then what do I do?
Three buttons, and choose the second button where you have a condividi schermo or something like that.
Meeting center.
And choose the second, the option below. Altre opzioni, I think it is. Take your time. So.
No, I can't find this. Sorry. I can't see anyone.
So it's the button. So if you, because first
it's just a blank. It's just a blank screen.
Yes, because you are not in the right place.
Okay. Okay.
Now I think you did it, and in fact we can see your presentation.
Okay. Okay.
So
right.
It's still an experiment, Rolf. After 10 years almost 10 years, we are still experimenting with the technology, but that's good. So please, Rolf, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Fabio, and thanks everyone. It's great to be back here and see so many participating in this Shanghai lecture. So today I'm actually talking from Malaga in Spain, where I'm currently working on our RoboLounge project. I will say more about that later on, just for those who are not familiar with the geography. So this is Europe, this is Spain down here on the left, and Malaga is a city in the south of Spain, near northern Africa. And then here you can see Gibraltar and the company Living with Robots, where I'm a scientific coordinator, is registered in the city of Gibraltar, which is actually a UK colony in Spain. I'm also affiliated with Shanghai Jiaotong University, and of course everyone knows Shanghai. I'm also happy that people from China are participating in this conference. Okay, now Fabio told me that I have to talk about, how the body shapes the way we think 10 years later, and I try to map that down onto more concrete topics like robot AI hype, embodied intelligence, soft robotics.
It was meant as a concrete. No, sorry.
Okay, so just to set the stage and to make clear what we're talking about. So why do plants not have brains? I'm not sure that you have asked yourselves this question, but I think it's a very interesting one. And then Louis Wolpert, British biologist, said, well, the answer is actually quite simple. They don't have to move. So in this view, the evolutionary selectionist pressure on the evolution of the brain has come from the need to interact with the environment, survive in the environment, move and locomote in the environment. And it also gives us a nice perspective, because when you look at brains in biological evolution, they're always part of a complete organism. There is no kind of algorithmic ether, but brains are always part of an organism that has to survive and interact with the environment. And the only way in which we can do this is, of course, through our own bodies. Now, another title that I gave for my talk is There Are Other Things Besides Deep Neural Networks. So recently I've been talking to many people, researchers in artificial intelligence and robotics, and I've been asking them what they do, and more than 90% said, well, I'm working on deep neural networks or variations thereof. I think deep neural networks are extremely powerful tools, algorithms, but there are things that go beyond. Okay, now, I think Robotics 2017 has a problem. By the way, I think what I'm saying now fits very well with what Fabio has been talking about. Robotics 2017 has a problem, and I'm not talking here about industrial robotics. I think overall, industrial robotics is in very good shape, and it has also proven itself over the last half century. So I'm not talking about industrial robotics, but this area that you might call consumer robotics or social robotics. Now, I think a lot of the issues have to do with the false expectations that people have, and part of the expectations people, of course, get from Hollywood movies. And Fabio also showed some, Hollywood movies. This video. I hope the videos work actually, in spite of the long. I don't know whether you can see this video. And now you get the reality. And here is from the DARPA challenge that Fabio mentioned. Turning the valve. Right, so you can see there's a discrepancy between the expectation and reality. Expectation is perfect functionality, polished look. The reality is mostly this toy look. On the right, you see a robot restaurant actually in Hefei in China. And you see here the robots, the waiter robots, they essentially have a tray there. And then there is a black line on the ground, and the robots, in essence, can follow this line. So in a sense, I think there are tin cans on wheels, and the human personnel has to put the dishes onto the trays. They then go to the table, what you can see in the lower left here, and the customers have to take their dishes from the trays. Now, because of this very limited functionality, some of these robot restaurants have already been closed, and others, they just got rid of the robots because they, they basically have very little functionality. Now, there is a robotic hype. I think Fabio already alluded to this one. And here is just a very recent announcement. The robot revolution has begun. This is from the IREX exhibition, which took place just end of November, beginning of December in Tokyo. Now, I think the whole movement started with this message in December 2013. Google buys 8 robotics companies in 6 months. Why? And then people thought, oh, wow, if Google does something, it must be something really important. And since then, the media have been full of reports about robotics, not only technological media, but economic media, financial media, the everyday media here from one of the most important German newspapers, Frankfurter Allgemeine, the dawn of the age of robotics, then a tabloid in Switzerland, the president of EPFL, writing about artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? Here, another tabloid in Switzerland, robots take command in the garden, of course, robot lawnmowers. And here is that robots also entered the trading floors. So UBS, one of the largest banks or in Switzerland, one of the largest in the world, is pioneering bots. I mean, these are not physical robots, but these are just software bots that support traders on the floor. And then, of course, the ultimate hype, and I will talk more about that in just a second, is this idea of AlphaGo, or now it's called AlphaGo Zero. We think of DeepMind, and this is Hasabi's, the CEO of DeepMind, and he says, we think of DeepMind as kind of an Apollo program effort for artificial intelligence. Our mission is to fundamentally understand intelligence and recreate it artificially. So they are alluding to the moon landing project, saying, you know, this is as big as the moon landing project. And there's a new initiative in Switzerland, which is basically going to be a worldwide initiative called MindFire. It was just launched, I think, about a month ago in Zurich at ETH. And you can see what it says, the race for human-level artificial intelligence, and then cracking the brain code, the moon landing of our time. And as a metaphor, you can see in the lower right, you know, President John Kennedy, when he is basically cheering or, you know, announcing the moon landing program and saying, we are doing this not because it's easy, but because it is hard. And, you know, I think we have a similar idea about artificial intelligence. Okay. Now back to reality. So robots in factories, they have been around for many, many years, over half a century. And so far they have been in factories behind walls. And you can see here, there's a welding robot. Well, you can see, you know, there are sparks, there are fumes, poisonous fumes, very loud, it's dangerous. There are no humans. It's fully automated, and that's a good thing, because humans should not be working in here. And they were behind factory walls, and that's why the robots at the time have not been so much in public awareness. But then about 25 years ago, quarter century ago, and fascinating movement started, namely that robots started leaving the factory halls. And of course, the champion of this movement is Honda Asimo, that I don't need to introduce, everybody knows it, and which also implies that the robots move into our own living space, which then, as Fabio was alluding to, leads to completely new requirements for the robots, because now we have to interact with the robots. And I would just like to mention, we've been talking recently to many, many investors, for example, and what many investors don't seem to fully understand is that robotics is a really hard discipline. I mean, Honda Asimo people have been working on that for a long time, 25 years, and it's still, you know, it can do many things, but it's still not the natural way of doing things like human beings. So robotics is hard. It's much harder than, let's say, mobile communication, because you have to deal with the physical world. Okay, now there is this field of service robotics, many applications, potential applications. I think there is a lot of huge potential there, but we have to be careful. Here, support suit, here, for example, a brain wave controlled wheelchair, a rewalk suit, you know, you can get out of the wheelchair, put on the suit, and you can walk on crutches. That's not the way it goes. It will be a lot of further development that is required. Here's more service robots, self-driving cars that were also mentioned, Amazon drone delivery here, the robot waiters on the right, lawnmowers, and so on. And then there is this category of social robots, you know, companions. And why are they called social robots? Well, because what they can do is they can talk, they can recognize a face, they can smile, they can maybe wave, and some can, you know, do a little bit of a dance, but in essence, they have no sensory motor functionality. And here's a very famous one, Jibo. I think it's pretty much of a failure. You can also see here is the original. It's in essence an iPhone in a tin can, and it has the functionality that you can already today have on your smartphone. And then there are many copies. Many of these copies are actually from China, but basically iPhones in a tin can. And then I went to this World Robot Conference in Beijing in 2016 and went through the exhibition, took random pictures. These are all from different companies. Social robots, they all have about the same functionality. They all also look about the same. More pictures from the same exhibition. They all look about the same, have the same functionality. More pictures from the same exhibition. They look the same, they have the same functionality. And then I went back to Shanghai, to this international robot show, took pictures, and they were all from different companies, you know, same functionality, they look the same, more pictures, same functionality, they look the same. And then I went back to the World Robot Conference in Beijing, to the exhibition, took more pictures, same functionality, they look the same functionality, namely the one of an iPhone. Now, all these companies, now why are they focusing on social robots? Why they focus on social robots is that they can, you know, they talk, they can see things, they can analyze faces, and, you know, they're nice, but they have no sensory motor functionality. Why? Because these, and we talk to many of these companies and investors, they say they target the mass market. Now, they're not interested, they're interested in selling, you know, 100,000, a million, 10 million. And the minute you start adding sensory motor functionality, you know, like manipulation skills, pouring a glass of beer or what have you, the costs of the robot start to skyrocket. And I think everyone who works in the field would agree with me on that. Now, the champion of social robots is, of course, the Pepper robot. And you can see here a little bit. I mean, I could ask who has been interacting with the Pepper robot. And people say, you know, I think it's a really sobering experience, because if you have been interacting with this robot for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then you get the impression you've seen it, right? And Pepper robot, I mean, it's really cute. It's also, from a technological point of view, I think it's a very good robot, but it has no sensory motor functionality, except it can wave a little bit. It can tell you about the latest features of Nespresso machines, but it cannot make coffee for you. So I think the novelty in the interaction with these kinds of robots, also with this toy look, wears off very, very quickly. Okay, now here is from a large, I think that was last year, from a large German magazine about a year ago. It says, "Hello Pepper, why is stupid robots gets into the headlines?" Now I can tell you why. I can tell you why, and that's anthropomorphization. So what's anthropomorphization? It means to attribute human form or personality to things not human. We have a strong tendency to do that. Of course, if the robot robots are very human-like, like this Chinese lady, beautiful Chinese robot lady on the left, or we all know Hiroshi Ishiguro's Geminoid, then it's very natural to attribute human-like properties to these robots. But they don't need to look like humans. They can look like these more sort of cartoon-like things. Also, Disney, if you think of, Donald Duck, it's just a few strokes on paper, but people, kids, attribute emotions to them. That's anthropomorphization. We attribute to these robots, even though they don't look like humans, we attribute human-like properties. We also tried our luck on social robots with this Roboy. I think many of you know the robot, and also with facial expressions expressing emotions. Let me just give you an idea.
Hey, listen. I want to show you how I can feel. I can be happy. I can be shy. I can be surprised. Ooh. I can be angry.
And so on. I think you're getting the idea. So, social robots, let's do a reality check. Mostly they have this children's toy look, social interaction, but lack of manipulation skills. Movement and locomotion very limited. Some of them can't move at all. Novelty wears off very quickly. And in essence, they have the functionality of an iPhone. The only difference is that the iPhone you can put into your pocket here, whereas these robots you have to carry around. Okay, iPhones in tin cans, iPhones on wheels. Then at the World Robot Conference in Beijing, I came across this robot, which I think is a very honest one, because this is really, indeed, an iPhone on wheels. I think a very honest robot, and it has the functionality of an iPhone. It's just like all the other robots, and you can already have this functionality without the need of having a robot. So I also think that if we look at the state of the art in robotics, in social robots today, full-featured humanoids are not anywhere in sight. So forget about Hollywood. We're not there. I'm not saying we will never be there, but we're not there, and not there in the near future. Okay, so there is a robot hype, and I think there's even bigger hype about these deep neural networks. So let's look at this. I think they have been extremely useful in many areas. Image processing, AlphaGo, I'll say more about that in a second. Speech and language, I think there has been a real boom in speech and language, improvement, qualitative improvement, because of these deep neural networks, self-driving vehicles, medical diagnostics, and of course, big data. Now let's just have a very quick, superficial look at what they do in the area of image processing. So the basic setup is as follows. So you show the network here, for example, a panda or a scene with children playing frisbee, and then you have the neural network. And the reason they are called deep neural networks is because you have many, many more layers than you used to have in the past. So you can have not only 5 layers, but you can have 10 layers, you can have 50 layers, you can have even more, and then you can extract the features of the situation more clearly. And then on the other side, you just you show a panda, and then you say, well, this is a panda, and you show this scene, and then you say, children, this is a scene with children playing frisbee. And if you show many examples to the network, over time, the network will learn to recognize in everyday scenes, children playing frisbee. One of the points I think that everyone knows, but is an issue, you need huge amounts of data. You need thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, and then the networks perform extremely well. And I think that's one of the issues. And people have, of course, recognized that. And I think one of the research topics is how can you make these networks less data hungry? And in big data, you really need a lot of data. Okay, I'll come back to this point in just a second. Now, the ultimate type in deep neural networks is, of course, AlphaGo or AlphaGo 0. And this is AlphaGo. I mean, let's say the brilliant idea behind AlphaGo is that they said, okay, we let the program play against the best versions of itself, and then it can, by doing this, it can continuously improve without human intervention. So it acquires basically knowledge without humans having to program the whole thing, and that's of course a very fascinating. We have to be aware of the fact that AlphaGo is still an algorithm, and I'll say a little more about that. It's entirely disembodied. There is no interaction with the real world whatsoever. Now, let me see. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Now, when people previously AI was, lots of different things. Now, when people talk about AI 10 years later, Fabio, when people talk about the AI, they basically talk about machine learning and deep neural networks, because artificial intelligence, in essence, is just algorithms, the way people look at it. I mean, I think it should be embodied. If we want functionality in the real world, it should be embodied, but the way people and the media now look at it is just these deep neural networks, machine learning, and they're pure algorithms. So there's a complete separation between, in this view, a complete separation between hardware and software. And also in this view, of course, I disagree with this, but intelligence equals software. They have a robot, and then they say, now we have to put the intelligence of the robot. I mean, that's completely inappropriate. Unintelligent mechatronic structure, morphology, materials are completely ignored. We have this model of input, processing, output, and the interaction. And I'll come back to that in a second. We have this, let me see, I have to check the time a bit, yes. Interaction with the environment is totally neglected. Okay, now before I go on, I think it's extremely important that we understand the difference between performance and competence. Okay, let's have a look at it. This is kind of the consultant's scheme, 4 squares. Now we have to fill in the squares. Here we have performance on the left, and here you have competence. Now we need to fill in the squares. So here in this square, I think we have AlphaGo or deep neural networks, machine learning. So very, very high performance, but very little competence. What do I mean? These neural networks that can recognize a cat in an everyday scene or children playing frisbee, they have absolutely no clue what a cat is, that a cat is an animal, that people have cats, like to have cats as pets, that cats have claws that they need to eat, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, extremely good performance, very little competence. They have absolutely no understanding of the scenes. AlphaGo, brilliant performance, absolutely wins all the time against humans and also against other programs, extremely high performance. AlphaGo doesn't know that it's playing Go. It doesn't know what a game is. It doesn't know why people play a game. It doesn't want to play. It's just algorithms that are running. Okay. So it has no understanding. So very little competence, very high performance. Now, I think the humans we can put here, in many aspects, they have very high performance, but AlphaGo has higher performance than Go. But AlphaGo then is one single individual task. Humans can do many, many, many tasks. So, and they also have competence. They understand what a cat is. They understand what a frisbee is. They understand the game of Go. Now, in the lower left corner, we don't want systems that have low performance and low competence, so that's uninteresting. And then I was thinking what I could put here in this one. Some people suggested, well, let's put a politician, or maybe we can put an intellectual. You know, they can talk about there's deep understanding about everything, but maybe not much performance. Okay, now let's do a thought experiment on AlphaGo. The board is 19 by 19. Now what happens if you change the size of the board to 18 by 18? Now a human player can still play. Maybe it's a bit unusual, but the human player can transfer the knowledge that it has and the understanding of Go to this new situation. AlphaGo or AlphaGo Zero, whatever, cannot make a single move anymore because it doesn't have any understanding of what it's doing. So I think we really have to be aware of this. And sometimes people say, well, AlphaGo plays a bit like a human. Now here, and Fabio mentioned the frame of reference problem, the fact that the moves that it makes are very human-like does not imply that the underlying mechanisms are also human-like. For example, I mean, this poor guy, Lee Sedol, he was sitting there with half a liter of cafe, his brain consuming 20 watts. Now the program AlphaGo was operated by about 100 scientists, and there were whole ranches of supercomputers consuming, well, slightly exaggerating, half a nuclear power plant's electricity. So it cannot possibly be the same thing. You know, it's something very different which is happening. Okay, I need to speed up. I have 10 minutes left. So back to social robots. Now, I think we need to deliver on the expectations of the public. Otherwise, they will say, you know, the robotics is no good. Functionality beyond speech and facial expression. And what we would like to do in that personally is comfortable, engaging, exciting interaction at a high coolness factor. That's the RoboLounge project. We're not trying to replace humans, but enhancing human experience. Okay, the RoboLounge project, and we want to make a space available where people can experience the future, not only talk about it. Okay, experience the future. Let me do this quickly. Now I have a video. I really do hope that this video works because of it's a very,
how will it be
requires high bandwidth
in the future when we actually live with robots?
Do they have feelings?
Can robots hurt us? Will they really understand me? Will they take care of me when I'm old? Will they take our jobs away? Can they see it? Can they smell? Will it be scary to connect with them?
Can I feel love from a robot?
We start the future with a drink in my robot. Erleben Sie die Zukunft mit einem Drink in meiner Robot. Prost, Cheers, Gambay, Salut, Chin Chin, santé, na zdrowie, kampanii.
Okay, I think you get the idea, and of course we will need a number of different kinds of robots, and the first one that we're focusing on is this bartender robot. Why a bartender? Because it needs a lot of manipulation skills, and of course we need it in the Robo Lounge, and these skills, the manipulation skill, pouring things, manipulating dishes and so on, interacting with the customers, are skills that are easily, directly transferable to many other domains. And what does a robot bartender need to be able to do? I think it's obvious. We know that customer presence recognition, visual contact, voice recognition, limited speech recognition, and so on, has to understand the order and deliver the order. Now, when we were pitching, we had to do a lot of pitching. I won't go into the story there, but we had to do at least 60 pitches. And some investors and companies that understand robotics, they said, but given the current state of the art in robotics, can you do it? Will it actually work? Yes, it will work if you take these three factors into account: embodiment, soft robotics, and scaffolding. Let's look at the first two. I think I'm really running badly out of time. I do this very quickly because I assume that this is very familiar. I think, therefore, I am suggesting, we all know this, suggesting that everything is happening up here in the head, in the brain. I think this is totally misguided for any real notion of intelligence. And let me just explain why. Now, I assume that you know Lego Mindstorms, and we've built some creatures here. This is Crazy Bird. I like very much. Here we have some others. Okay. Now, you saw three completely different behaviors. And whenever you observe a system, the question comes up as to the underlying mechanism. So how does this behavior come about? What is the control underlying the behavior? It's in the lower right. It's just the wheels turning at a constant speed. It's the same for all three creatures. But the behavior was completely different. Why is that possible? Because it's embedded into a completely different morphology. And this is Crazy Bird. Crazy Bird was doing several things, not only one thing, but the control is always the same. And it has like, I have 5 minutes left. It has on the one side a rubber piece and on the other plastic. And if it does this, and by chance on the one side, the rubber piece is on the ground and the other, the plastic, because of the difference of friction, it will spin around its own axis. So only looking at the brain or control is not sufficient. We must understand how the control is embedded into the brain or into the robot. And maybe I should skip that and give you an example of what we mean by embodiment. So this is actually, now this is actually a robot, Stumpy, that we built a couple of years ago, and it only has 2 degrees of freedom. It can only do this, and has some springy materials, but so we can only control these 2. But now watch what happens. Oops, sorry. And so on. I mean, you're getting the idea. Now, you saw also that the robots were lifting off the feet from the ground. And if you look at the control only, there's no way in which there's no lifting of the feet. You have to understand how the control is embedded into the physical system. and you have to understand the physical dynamics. Another beautiful example is this frog robot built by pneumatic actuators. Jumping. Now look at the slow motion. And now look at the damped oscillation here. That's not controlled, that's only the material properties of the pneumatic actuators as damped oscillation. Now, these are soft materials. Now, there's an interesting number. The factory robots that we saw before, welding robots, they're built from hard materials, steel, plastic, electrical motors. Humans, by contrast, are built 85% of soft materials. And the reason the human sensory motor system is so incredibly powerful is because we are built of soft materials. So if we want to approach this behavior or this power with robots, we need to understand soft systems and we need to build soft systems. So this is this idea of soft robotics. I go through this quickly. This is a traditional robot, boing, position, grasp, position, grasp. By contrast, the universal coffee balloon gripper is completely different. So what they did, they took a balloon, they filled it with ground coffee, which is very soft. They added a vacuum pump here, and then with the balloon, they move over an object. They lower the balloon over the object, and because it's very soft, it will adapt. The shape will adapt to the shape of the object at the periphery, not by centralized control. And then they apply the vacuum, the structure hardens, and they can grasp virtually any object with one and the same control. And the entire adaptivity is at the periphery. Now watch this video. This is always the same control. I mean, it's unbelievable. I find this absolutely amazing. For all those who have been working on manipulation, yeah, look at this. Okay, I think you're getting the idea now. Similar principles hold for human beings holding a hard object. And I just go through this quickly, but I think it's, do I have another 2 minutes or 3 minutes? Yeah, okay. If you're grasping a glass like this, it's really effortless. Now, if you put thimbles on all fingers, okay, I have a video here. Let me just show you the video, okay? Now, watch this one.
Okay, very easy.
Right, very effortless. You know, what am I talking about? It's very easy. Now, if you put thimbles, these things that you use for sewing, on all the fingers, and then you try to do the same. Now watch the lower right corner. This is what happens. Let me play it again. It's virtually impossible to grasp a glass like this. And then you start realizing what the materials do for you. And this is what we call the power of materials, or the power of soft materials. Okay, now we do a robotics gripper. We can't use a balloon in the bar because we don't want to dip the balloon into the glass. So we have to build a gripper. And now this leads to an expansion of the design space. I think I'm going to skip this. I think it's very, very interesting. Would have been really, really, really interesting, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip it. And I would like to finish this theoretical part by just introducing these sensory motor contingencies. Now, I mentioned before that normally people think of intelligent behavior as input, processing, output. So you have the senses and the brain does some processing on it and produces some output. That's not how intelligent systems work, but intelligent systems behave in the real world, they act, and every action has as a consequence sensory stimulation. And sensory motor contingencies are law-like relations between movements and associated changes in sensory stimulation. So when I turn my head like that, I generate visual sensory stimulation. the visual information changes because I'm behaving in the real world. And I just want to give you that as an inspiration to think about, and that what you see, the sensory stimulation that you generate depends on the morphology, the action, and of course, on the environment. And then the last point, scaffolding, I will just mention. We don't need to build a universal robot. We can exploit the structure in the environment. A bartender has very limited space. It doesn't need to be able, doesn't even need to be able to walk. It just needs to move back and forth behind the counter. We have predefined positions for objects. We have a very narrow context for the conversation, and all this can be exploited. And I think normally people just think about putting too many things into the robot, but I think it's more profitable to think about things not to put into the robots or to put into the environment. We don't need a universal waiter robot. So I'll see you in the Robo Lounge in the near future. And beware, robot technology is complex, slow return on investment. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay. The views are great and very inspiring. I think that when you grasp with the symbols, the still symbols is pure genius. I mean, on top of many other. So I guess we may have some questions. Please use the chat if you want to book for a chat. I think
we're over time already.
We are slightly over time, but I think it was for me. As far as I'm involved, I may have waited, give you a couple of hours more to listen to it.
No, thank you. Thank you. Very kind. Yeah.
No, please, come in. You have a question from Mia. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to understand about the deep learning constraints, I mean, what are the limitations right now for the deep learning, which would be fixed for the future research point of view, for the robotics or for the other medical diagnosis problems like for the clinical assessment or something like that. So could you please give some key points where we can work for the deep learning, for the limitation which are we have?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Let me just, I mean, there are many issues, and also deep learning is not just one thing, you know, that you can say, he works on deep learning, but people do many, many things in this field. It's really a very rich and complicated research field. Let me just pick out one issue, which I think is really important, and it relates to this idea of performance versus competence. And one issue in there is the following. If you look at a little boy, it doesn't need 10 million, it doesn't need to see 10 million pictures with a cat in it. A few situations are more than sufficient. And I think these deep neural networks at present are very, very data hungry and need a lot of data. And that's one of the issues that now many people have started working on, and I think this is very important, that you can make it less dependent on large amounts of data, that you can actually work with a lot, you know, just a few situations and exploit these situations more, maybe connecting them to some kind of knowledge or understanding, so that you don't need such a lot of data. And you have to be aware. I talk to many people who work in big data, and they told me, I said, well, how much, time do you spend on collecting data? I said, it's hard to give a number, but roughly 80% of the time they spend on collecting data, cleaning out the data, structuring the data such that they can actually feed it into these algorithms. And very few people have been working on deep neural networks in direct interaction with the real world. There are some people who started using them on real robot environment interactions, but very, very few. So I think there are a few issues that I really think there is a lot of potential for research, and I expect a lot of interesting results to come out there, and that will ultimately also benefit the idea that we don't want systems that only have high performance, but also have high competence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, says thank you. Okay, I don't know if you have other questions. So please use
already over time,
Yeah, I know. Okay, if you have questions, I think that Rolf will be happy to answer to your question. I will be happy to bridge to Rolf, or you may easily find him on the internet, I think. So thank you for attending, everybody. Now we have a presentation from Section, if they are ready.